Part 1: The Quiet Minds That Change the World. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine someone sitting alone in a crowded room. They're not talking. They're not reacting. They're simply watching, listening. They seem almost invisible, yet oddly magnetic. Their silence is not empty, it's charged. You can feel it. Something ancient, something powerful, something utterly alive is pulsing beneath their stillness. You might dismiss them as shy. But what if they're not shy at all? What if they're seeing what you can't see? What if they're thinking what you can't even imagine? This is the paradox of intelligence. The most brilliant minds are often the quietest. Not because they lack thoughts, but because their thoughts are too vast, too nuanced, too sacred to be wasted in trivial noise. We live in a world where volume is mistaken for value, where attention is currency, but the genius doesn't play that game. Their silence is their rebellion. And today, we're going to uncover the 8 profound reasons why highly intelligent people often stay silent, and how that silence is not weakness, but wisdom. Let's begin with the first reason: they understand the power of observation. Before they speak, they watch. They scan the environment, the energy of the room, the psychology of the people around them. They know that information is always flowing, but the loud miss it. In staying silent, they gather data, patterns, micro-expressions, contradictions. As Leonardo da Vinci once said, the greatest deception men suffer is from their own opinions. The intelligent person delays opinion. They wait. They watch. Because they know that reacting too quickly is often reacting too foolishly. This leads us to the second reason. They've learned that most conversations are ego rituals, not truth-seeking dialogues. When people speak, they're often not trying to understand, they're trying to be understood. They're defending identity, projecting insecurity, or signaling virtue. But the genius has little interest in such games. They're not here to impress, they're here to know. Plato warned us long ago. Wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something. So instead of wasting energy in shallow talk, the intelligent person chooses silence because silence protects depth. The third reason is even more profound. They understand the fragility of truth. Highly intelligent people know that truth is not something to be thrown around like a weapon. It is delicate, contextual, often misunderstood. They've seen how easily truth can be twisted by bias, emotion, or manipulation. So they guard it. They speak only when the environment can hold the weight of what they want to share. Otherwise, they let it remain in the sacred vault of their mind. Nietzsche once wrote, "Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed." The genius knows this, and they respect the illusion until the moment is right to break it. Now we arrive at the fourth reason. They are deeply self-aware. This is not the shallow self-awareness of self-help books. This is existential awareness. They know their triggers, their blind spots, their limitations. They know that speaking can often be a way to hide from thinking. So they think first, they reflect, they meditate, and only when the thought is fully formed, only when it rings with inner clarity, do they let it out. Confucius said, "Silence is a true friend who never betrays." The intelligent person befriends silence before they ever trust their voice.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But let's not romanticize it too much. There's also a fifth reason, and it's darker. They've been punished for speaking the truth before. Many intelligent people carry the scars of past conversations, times when they said too much, too soon, too raw, and were ridiculed, rejected, or misunderstood. So they learned. They learned to hold back, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. They realize that truth is a fire and most people are made of paper. So they wait for the ones who are made of stone. They wait for kindred minds before they speak freely. Here's a question for you. Have you ever silenced yourself not because you didn't know what to say, but because you knew the world wasn't ready to hear it? If so, you're not alone. That silence wasn't cowardice. It was discernment. It was the quiet nobility of a mind that values truth over applause. Let's go deeper now. The sixth reason highly intelligent people stay silent is this: they see the impermanence of opinion. They've watched people get outraged one day and forget the next. They've seen beliefs rise and fall like fashion trends. So they don't rush to insert their voice into the noise. They understand that most debates are not about truth, they're about identity maintenance. So they remain still, timeless, rooted. As Lao Tzu wrote, "He who knows does not speak. He who speaks does not know." It's not always true, but it contains a truth that sometimes the wisest thing to say is nothing. Now we come to the seventh reason. They communicate in different dimensions. For the highly intelligent, words are only one mode of expression and often the least effective. They communicate through creation, through art, through energy, through art, through energy. Watch how they live, and you'll hear them speak. Their silence is not emptiness, it is a canvas. It is a waiting room for something deeper than language. As Carl Jung said, words are animals alive with a will of their own. And sometimes, the genius doesn't want to unleash that animal until it's truly necessary. Finally, the eighth and perhaps most transformative reason: they are in dialogue with the universe. While most people are in constant dialogue with the world, the intelligent person often retreats into a deeper conversation with their own soul, with the cosmos, with the ineffable mystery of being. Their silence is meditation. It's communion. It's not a lack of speech, it's a presence so vast that words can't contain it. They're not avoiding the world, they're transcending it. They're listening for the divine whispers that only silence can hear. At this point, you may have seen something stirring within yourself. A recognition, a memory, a moment when you stayed silent not because you didn't know, but because you knew too much. Maybe you've always felt a little different, a little distant, like the noise of the world never quite matched the frequency of your mind. And now maybe you're beginning to understand why. This is not about superiority. It's about sensitivity. Intelligence is not always about IQ. It's about depth, awareness, perception. And the more sensitive the mind, the more sacred silence becomes. In the next part, we'll explore how this silence can be weaponized, healed, and turned into power. We'll go deeper into the psychology of restraint, the philosophy of presence, and the paradox of transforming the world without ever raising your voice. We'll walk through inner temples, confront the fear of being misunderstood, and discover why silence may be the final frontier of genius. But before we go there, ask yourself this: what would your life look like if you stopped explaining yourself to people who were never truly listening? Part 2. The sacred power of restraint. There is a silence that comes from fear. And then there is a silence that comes from depth. One shrinks in the presence of others. The other expands beyond the need to be seen. When highly intelligent people stay silent, it's not because they have nothing to say, it's because they've learned the value of not saying it. There's a sacred restraint in their mind, like a dam holding back a flood. The question isn't whether they can speak. The question is whether the world is ready for what they have to say. Let's begin again with something uncomfortable. Most of what we say is not for clarity, but for control. We speak to shape perceptions, to gain approval, to manage impressions. But the highly intelligent have outgrown that game. They know that the moment you need to explain yourself to be understood, you've already handed over your power. Silence becomes a form of non-participation in the ego theater. It is not passivity, it is sovereignty. And sometimes the most powerful message is the act of not performing. This leads us to a profound psychological truth. The more intelligent you are, the more sensitive you become to the weight of words. Words are not neutral. They carry energy, consequence, karma. Once spoken, they ripple through reality in ways we can't always predict. The intelligent person understands this, often subconsciously. They speak not to impress, but to influence reality with precision. And when precision is not possible, they choose silence over distortion. As Pythagoras said, either be silent or say something better than silence. Imagine if we lived by that. But what happens when intelligent silence encounters misunderstanding? This is where the real challenge begins. Highly intelligent people are often misread. Their silence is mistaken for arrogance, aloofness, or apathy. But in truth, they're simply operating on a different frequency. They're not interested in being loud, they're interested in being aligned. And that alignment often requires solitude. As Schopenhauer noted, a man can be himself only so long as he is alone. So they withdraw not from people, but from noise. And that withdrawal is mistaken for detachment. Now let's go deeper. There's a reason why many wise people throughout history, philosophers, mystics, sages, retreated from society, not to escape, but to observe from a higher vantage point. Silence is not absence, it's elevation. It's the space where thought becomes vision, where the personal becomes universal, and where the ego dissolves into something timeless. The intelligent person senses this. They're not just thinking, they're tuning in to something far older than language. And that kind of communion cannot be rushed. So here's a question for you. When was the last time you were silent, not out of fear, but out of reverence for what you were about to say? Can you recall a moment where your silence carried more truth than any words could? If so, you've already tasted what we're talking about. You've already glimpsed the edge of genius. Now let's shift. Silence is also a strategic act. The intelligent mind understands the art of timing. Not every truth needs to be spoken immediately. Not every opinion needs to be aired. There is a season for every word. A moment when it will land, and a moment when it will be wasted. The genius waits. They are like an archer drawing back the bow, holding it, feeling the tension, until the exact instant when the arrow must be released. And when it is, it hits with precision. This kind of restraint requires a level of emotional mastery that most people never develop. Highly intelligent people are often emotionally intelligent as well. They read the emotional undercurrents in a room. They sense when someone is posturing, projecting, or pretending, and they choose silence not to judge but to protect. Sometimes they stay quiet because they know that speaking would only feed the other person's delusion, and they care too much to do that. Silence in this way becomes an act of compassion. Let's take a moment to turn inward. Have you ever walked away from a conversation knowing you could have said something brilliant, but chose not to? Not out of fear, but out of something deeper, something wise. That moment wasn't a loss. It was a victory, because you chose peace over ego. You chose presence over performance. And that choice is rare. Let's talk now about inner silence. The silence we've been exploring isn't just external, it's internal. Highly intelligent people often cultivate a kind of inner stillness, a quiet mind, a space between thoughts. This doesn't mean they're empty, it means they're clear. Clarity is not the absence of thought, it's the alignment of thought. And that alignment can only happen when the noise subsides. As Blaise Pascal said, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. The genius has solved that problem. They've made peace with solitude. But this peace comes at a cost. The more intelligent you become, the more alone you may feel. Because depth is rare, and silence, while sacred, can also be isolating. You may find yourself in conversations that feel like echoes. You may long for someone who can hear the symphony beneath your silence. This is the burden of insight, and yet it is also the gateway to transcendence, because silence teaches you to become your own companion, your own witness, your own guide. Let us not forget, silence is also a form of resistance. In a world addicted to noise, the silent person stands out not by shouting but by not participating. The genius doesn't need to prove their intelligence. They don't chase validation. Their silence is their refusal to be consumed by the trivial. It's their stand against the superficial. In this way, silence becomes a kind of spiritual protest, a refusal to betray the depth of one's own mind. And now we arrive at a paradox. Silence can be louder than speech. When an intelligent person interrupts a pattern not with debate, but with presence, they shift the entire field. One moment of mindful silence can dismantle an argument. One breath of stillness can reveal the absurdity of the noise. This is not passive. This is power. And it is rooted in a core truth, that what is not said often carries more weight than what. So here's another question. What have you been trying to explain that might be better left in silence? What truth have you been pushing that might be better lived than spoken? If you're honest, you'll find that some of your most profound insights can only be transmitted energetically, not verbally. In the next and final part, we'll explore the ultimate transformation of silence, how it becomes a force for creation, leadership, even revolution. We'll examine how silence is not the end of communication, but its highest form. We'll journey into the lives of those who changed the world without ever raising their voice, and we'll discover how your silence can become your signature, your strength, your legacy. But for now, hold this thought in your heart. What if your silence is not the absence of voice, but the presence of truth too powerful to be spoken? Part 3. When silence becomes power. There's a moment in every great life when silence is no longer just a form of restraint, it becomes a form of creation. It becomes action. When highly intelligent people stay silent, they are not withdrawing from the world, they are shaping it from the inside. Their silence is not emptiness, it is density, it is gravity. And like gravity, it pulls reality into form without ever needing to raise its voice. Let's begin with something that feels almost supernatural. True silence generates presence. Presence is that rare quality only a few people seem to carry. You feel it when they walk into a room. You feel it before they speak, and sometimes they never do. The highly intelligent often exude this kind of presence not because they've practiced charisma, but because they've cultivated inner alignment. Their silence is not awkward, it's anchored. It tells the world, I don't need to convince you, I am the message. This is why many of the world's most powerful leaders speak less than you'd expect. Their words are rare, but when they come, they reverberate. It's not about volume, it's about authenticity. They've stored up silence like a battery, and when they release it, it moves people. As Epictetus said, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. The intelligent person has internalized this. They've realized that silent listening builds invisible influence. And over time, that influence becomes unshakable. But how does silence become leadership? The answer is simple: by mastering emotional regulation. In moments of tension, most people react. They explode. They speak to release pressure. But the intelligent individual has trained their nervous system to hold the charge. They've learned to breathe through the discomfort, to observe the chaos without becoming it. And in doing so, they become the calm in the center of the storm. That calm is magnetic. People follow it. even if they don't understand why. Here's something to reflect on. When things get chaotic, do you speak to calm others or to calm yourself? If you're honest, you may find that much of your talking is just self-soothing. The genius has transcended that, not because they don't feel emotions, but because they've built the inner structure to contain them without leakage. Their silence is containment, and that containment is power. Let's now talk about the creative power of silence. Many of the greatest works of art, science, and philosophy were born not in rooms full of conversation, but in solitude, in silence, in the sacred stillness where thoughts are given time to form. The intelligent mind knows that ideas are like seeds; they need darkness to grow. Constant talking is like digging them up every 5 minutes to check if they've sprouted. But silence, silence. Silence is the soil. It is the womb of genius. This is why the intelligent often seem to vanish before they create something monumental. They're not avoiding the world, they're gestating something deeper than the world can see. And when they return, they don't bring noise, they bring form, they bring clarity, they bring something that didn't exist before. And that is the mark of true intelligence, not just the ability to think, but the ability to birth thought into reality. But silence isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's a battlefield. And here is where we confront one of the most misunderstood aspects of intelligent silence. It can be a form of protest. The refusal to speak is sometimes the most radical thing you can do. When the world demands your opinion, your outrage, your alignment, and you give it nothing, that nothing becomes a mirror. It reflects back the insanity. It reveals just how addicted society is to noise. Think of figures like Gandhi, who said, "In the attitude of silence, the soul finds the path in a clearer light." His silence was not passive. It was weaponized stillness, a moral force, a refusal to play the game of reaction, of escalation. And in that refusal, he became untouchable. This is the kind of silence that doesn't just protect the self, it shifts the world. But what about relationships? What happens when your silence is misunderstood by the people closest to you? This is perhaps the most painful part of being highly intelligent and quiet. Your silence can be mistaken for distance. Loved ones may take it personally. They may interpret your introspection as rejection. But here's the truth. The intelligent person is with you even when they're not speaking. They're listening, processing, feeling, perhaps more deeply than you'll ever know. This is why emotional transparency becomes so important. Not the kind that spills everything out in words, but the kind that communicates through presence, through eye contact, through subtle acts of care. The intelligent person must learn to bridge the silence, not by speaking more, but by connecting more consciously. Because silence is only powerful when it's also compassionate. Without compassion, it becomes a wall. With it, it becomes a sanctuary. Let us now consider the final transformation, when silence becomes a legacy. Some of the most powerful people in history left behind very few words, but their silence echoed through generations. Think of the hermits, the monks, the reclusive artists. They didn't need to explain themselves. They didn't need to brand themselves. Their being was their message. Their silence was the proof of their inner clarity. And this is what we must learn in a world obsessed with speed, noise, and visibility. Your silence can be your masterpiece. Not because it hides you, but because it reveals that you found something deeper than validation. Something that doesn't need applause. Something that doesn't need to be liked. Something that simply is true, grounded, and eternal. So let me ask you one final question. What if the most intelligent thing you can do right now is to say nothing? To let go of the need to respond. To let go of the need to convince. To sit with yourself long enough to hear what's never been said. Because somewhere deep inside you, there is a silence that is not empty. It is full of clarity, full of strength, full of truth.